About 1 week ago, Miles Jacobson released the second development update for Football Manager 2025. And normally I wouldn't talk about these things on the channel, but this is the first development update that is actually going to affect what I'm going to be doing on this channel for Football Manager 2025. So because of that, I wanted to talk through the development update because admittedly, it is going to affect the channel, and there are also some things that now might be a little bit worrying for FM25 that I wanted to talk about. And I do want to note that I consider myself to be an eternal optimist, so when I see something that actually worries me, I feel the need to talk about it a little bit because I generally have a positive outlook on things. I try to do it on the channel, but this is kind of the first time that some football manager news has really worried me. I know that the reaction to this has been largely negative. I've read the kind of Reddit post for this, and I know on X.com or formerly Twitter, there's a lot of negative news around this that I do think might be a little bit blown out of proportion. I feel like nobody hates Football Manager more than the social media Football Manager community. People really just love to complain. So hopefully, as we talk about this, we'll have a little bit more of a reasoned outlook on what this development update really means and what the future of FM25 holds. But anyways, with all that said, let's go into things. So the first part of this development update is talking about the FIFA World Cup with Football Manager. So this was the first time where Football Manager was an esport. I think this was an absolutely fantastic competition. I was following it relatively on social media, and I think it was great. A huge congratulations to our Southeast Asian counterparts from Indonesia for winning the first ever Football Manager World Cup. I want to give a massive shout out to them. They did an amazing job at the tournament. And with that in mind, if for whatever reason anyone from the Philippines Football Federation is watching this video, or if you guys want to campaign for it, please, I would love to see a Filipino delegation sent by the PFF to any future Football Manager World Cup events. I think that would be awesome. I don't know what qualifying would look like, but given how important Football Manager has been to the Filipino footballing community, I mean, the top goal scorer of all time in the Philippines, Phil Younghusband, and his brother James were found to be eligible to play for the Philippines national team because some kid was playing Football Manager, noticed that they had Filipino eligibility, and as a result, they became one of the greatest Filipino footballing duos of all time. Football Manager has an incredibly important role and is an incredibly important piece of our footballing history. And because of that, I think we should be involved in these kind of things. Indonesia sent a delegation. South Korea sent a delegation. Why couldn't the Philippines send a delegation? I think this is something that should be considered for FM25 or beyond. So I guess this is a plea to the PFF. Please send a Filipino delegation to the next Football Manager World Cup. Admittedly, I wouldn't expect to be a part of this. There are so many better Football Manager players out there with Philippines eligibility who would probably be better to represent the Philippines in the Football Manager World Cup. The PFF, go find them. There are probably people watching this channel, this video, who would be able to represent the Philippines in the World Cup and who would do an amazing job. PFF, go find them, put out a call. It would be amazing to have people representing the Philippines at the Football Manager World Cup, especially given how important Football Manager has been to our sporting history. Please do this. This would be awesome. I would love to see that. So, yeah, the first part of this is all about the Football Manager World Cup. I was thinking about making that its own separate video, just like a plea to the Philippines to do this, but I'll include it as part of this in the development update. But anyways, let's actually move into Football Manager things. So the last part up here is talking about the last development update where they did remove a lot of the features that we currently have in Football Manager and talked about removing them for FM25 to hopefully make them better in FM26. For the most part, I didn't really care about this. A lot of the features they were removing, I thought weren't great in Football Manager anyway, so it was nice to see that they were thinking about those features and how to improve them. So as we move into here, the first kind of big news is that they are revising the timeline for when FM25 will be released. Normally, the new version of Football Manager is released beginning of November. It's now scheduled for late November, as we can see here. So this, I don't think, is a huge deal. I've seen a lot made of this on social media. I think it's fine that it's moving to a late November. It's going to allow us more time to play FN24 on this channel. But also, I think this was to be expected. I mean, they're making essentially FM 2.0, new match engine, new Unity engine. So I'm not too surprised about this. I think this is fine. But something I have noticed is that everything they've done before prefacing something that they're removing from the game, they talked about this. They says, as I outlined in June's blog, we've consistently held ourselves accountable to the same three core questions. Would we do it the same way again? Would we have done it all? Do we have the time required? They've prefaced any kind of big removal of something from the game by saying this. And I know this is kind of a justification for it, but I don't think this is something that necessarily connects with fans of the game. So I don't know if they need to say this each time. With that being said, the big news is that international management will not be a playable mode in FM25. And I'm going to be honest with you all. I think this is a huge swing and a miss from Football Manager. The reason for that is because they are introducing the women's game in FM25. And the biggest part, the most connectable part with fans of the women's game is the international footballing scene. Way more so than I think the men's side of the game. A lot of people on the men's side of the game, I think, and this is just my personal opinion, this might not be relevant to everyone. But as far as the men's side of the game is concerned, I think a lot of people know a lot more about men's club football than international football. Obviously, people connect to men's international football. The World Cup, the Euros, all of these are such huge events. But that being said, a lot of people are really connected with their clubs. On the flip side, though, I think a lot more people on the women's side of the game are connected with international management. Women's club football is still continuing to grow, and I think the real emergence of teams like Lyon, Barcelona, Chelsea, like all of these teams are emerging. But I couldn't tell you much about like the women's football leagues. I mean, I know a little bit about like the WSL, the NWSL, but overall, I don't know a whole lot about women's club football. And I think a lot of people really connect with the international side of the game. And I think a big reason for that is because there's way more international matches in women's football than there are men's. A lot of players tend to play way more caps for their country on the women's side of the game. And there are more kind of big women's footballing tournaments. Like major footballing tournaments include the World Cup, the Continental Tournament, and the Olympics, which just happened. And the Olympics was, in my opinion, a huge success. I thought the Women's Olympics was an amazing tournament. It was so fun to watch. And especially on the back of that international tournament, to see that international management isn't going to be playable in FM25, I do think is a bit of a miss for Football Manager, especially when you're introducing the women's side of the game, where international football is so ingrained in women's footballing culture. I think it's a bit of a miss to see that this isn't going to be a playable mode in FM25. And that is going to affect the channel because, to be honest with you all, my plan for FM25 was to become the manager of the Filipino women's team in FM25. They just made the World Cup. And they just won a game in the World Cup. The breakdown of them winning the World Cup is actually the most viewed video on this channel. And I thought it was going to be so fun to take the Filipino women's team and try to lead them to the next World Cup and try to win a game in the World Cup and to be the manager of this Filipino team and of this generation of players that could potentially grow into making the World Cup fairly consistently. I thought that was going to be a lot of fun. I thought that was going to be a great challenge. But we're not going to be able to do that until at least FM26. But with that all being said, that's kind of the bad news, right? There is another side to look at this, and I want to talk about that other side. Because again, I want to look at this in a more reasoned manner. Them removing international management does mean they are working on improving international management in Football Manager. And international management has not been good in Football Manager for a long time. A lot is wrong with international management, which doesn't mean that not all of it is right. I think international management is still a fun mode to play. They say that only 5.6 of all FM24 PC saves have used international management, which I find interesting. I personally have played international management pretty much every year since FM18, and I always enjoy international management as part of a build a nation save where you're managing in that country and then also become the manager of that country. I think that's a lot of fun because then you can kind of develop players as part of your club to include in the national team. But there's been a lot wrong with international management. You can't train. A lot of the match sharpness and the conditions are kind of broken in it. And it's hard to develop a nation as the international manager. So there is a lot kind of not good with it. And it's nice to hear that they want it to be better, that they want to improve it. And going into a year in 2026, when at least the men's World Cup will be happening, bringing back international management for FM26 and being like, hey, the World Cup's coming up. You have one season and the World Cup will be there. It could be huge. It could be big news that they're going to be, bringing back international management next year. And hopefully it'll be new and improved. Hopefully it'll be, up to the highest possible standard that they're looking for. So this is kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I do think it's a big miss in a year where the women's game is coming into Football Manager that they're not going to have international management. But on the other hand, this could mean that international management will be new and improved for FM26, which is something that Football Manager has needed for a long time. So it is kind of, we're in, two sides of the coin here. But I guess we're not really going to know if this is quote unquote good news until FM26 comes out. FM26 is going to be huge because, a lot of these things that were taken out are going to be in FM26, hopefully. And obviously, any kind of bugs in FM25 will hopefully be improved for FM26. So FM26 is going to be kind of a huge year for them, just as this is. FM26 is going to be a big year. And we won't know really what these development update means until FM26. But that is the news with international management. It still will remain playable in FM25 mobile. I know there are a lot of people that play FM25 mobile, so hopefully that will be good news for them. I also want to note, because it's kind of funny, for whatever reason, Miles Jacobson really wanted people to know that he's canceled his trip to America, which he was really looking forward to. I just thought that was weird to include in the FM development update. The other bit of big news coming out of the development update is that they're removing a player's weight from player profiles in FM25. For this, I guess it's still going to be like maybe if you have the in-game editor or something, you'll still be able to see kind of a generic version of the player's weight, but it's not going to be visible necessarily on the profile. Now, I want to start off by saying that for this, I think this is kind of not important news at all. A player's weight has never affected anything in the match engine. Height and weight do not affect the match engine. I think a lot of people really find height and weight to be important. For you guys, height and weight are purely for the animation. Height and weight do not matter in Football Manager. If you want weight, if you want to look at weight, look at strength. If you want to look at height, look at jumping reach. Those are the things that actually affect the match engine in Football Manager. A player's weight does not matter, and it has never mattered outside from animation purposes, maybe so that you can have some idea of what your player looks like. In which case, at this point, I guess, just look at their strength, look at their jumping reach, and if you really want to know what they look like, just when you're playing a match, you can give them a look. The reason that I think this news was a little bit weird is their reasoning for the news, which is that women's body types are very different from men's and their weight fluctuates a lot, more often weekly. And this is true. Women's weights do fluctuate a lot. But what I think is weird about it is that men's weights also fluctuate a lot through, especially like throughout a day, a week, or a season. Like if you look at most sports and most men's sports, a player's weight is going to fluctuate. Like I think we've seen a lot of examples of players coming back overweight to start a season and then losing weight throughout the season and then gaining weight or losing weight. And especially like younger players, their weight is going to change a lot from week to week or from month to month. Like the work that I do in part of my university work is that I do research on people's bodies essentially. And we actually have to control for weight because it changes from day to day. And depending on what people might have done before the study visit could affect their weight during the study visit. So we have a whole like 8 to 10 hour protocol where we try to control a lot of factors in people's lives so that they can come in and kind of weight and things like that can be standardized. And that is both for men and women. So I think the fact that they kind of was like, we're removing weight because of the introduction of women's football was a little bit weird. I think the reasoning for this was odd. Could have just not mentioned this, and I don't think a whole lot of people would have really noticed. The other thing they could have done, like it would have just been like one thread on Reddit would have been like, hey, they removed weight, and everyone would have been like, this is weird, and still kept playing the game. I feel like they could have just said something like they found that the weights weren't super accurate, that maybe publicly available data wasn't super accurate. So, or they could have just said like weight is for animation purposes, and for that reason, we're removing it from players' profile pages so that we can focus more on the attributes that actually affect the match engine. I just thought the reasoning was weird. I don't think, but again, I don't think this is a super important piece of news at all. A player's weight doesn't affect the match engine. So, if anything, other than for animation purposes, this isn't an important bit of news. I've seen a lot of people complaining. I've seen a lot of people on social media getting mad that the weight is gone. Like, how are they going to know what their player looks like and what their player is going to be like? That's just going to be in the actual attributes. Just look at strengths, and that will tell you everything you need to know. The last bit of news here is that the next development update, they'll actually start to focus more on what's in FM25. I'm going to be honest with you, the marketing for FM25 so far by Football Manager has not been great. The last two development updates have been really focused on things they're removing from the game, and they haven't really talked at all about what's in FM25. So I am really excited to see what is actually going to be in FM25, what the game is going to look like. If you are hesitant about buying FM25, I will, of course, be playing FM25, so hopefully this will give you all a chance to see what FM25 is about. I'll also review the game so that you all can see, and I'll try to give my fairest review on whether sticking with FM24 and waiting till FM26 is the move, or whether FM25 really is a lot of fun. So, of course, I'll be looking at that as well. But that all being said, that is everything. I guess maybe I'll talk about the next development update, depending on what's in it. But I did want to talk about this development update since it will be affecting what is happening on the channel in the future. But that all being said, that is everything from Mr. Miles Jacobson. We wait keenly for the next development update, but until then, we'll still be continuing the FM24 stuff. But anyways, I hope you guys have found this helpful, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!